A building surveyor with a long history of approving shoddy houses and apartment projects in Melbourne's southeast has pleaded to keep his license to practice, despite failing to issue proper approvals for at least 1,500 homes. Until last month, building surveyor Cameron Zand Basiri was allowed to keep his registration to practice for many years, despite the Andrews government's building authority knowing his history of malpractice. In his 17 years as a building surveyor, Mr. Basiri approved just under 6,000 houses and apartments. In court documents, he said at his peak he was issuing 800 permits a year. At least 5 of the apartment buildings Mr. Basiri signed off in 2017 and 2018 failed safety standards so badly they will cost their owners millions of dollars to repair. And in 1,500 cases, Mr. Basiri's failure to close permits means residents in these homes are occupying residences that have no final sign-off as safe to occupy. In August, the Victorian Building Authority suspended Mr. Basiri after half a decade of repeatedly prosecuting him for his work. A spokeswoman said Mr. Basiri had a history of discipline with the authority. Victoria's domestic construction sector has teetered from crisis to crisis in recent years, with defects and flammable cladding prompting safety fears for hundreds of buildings around the state. Concerns over faulty buildings peaked last week when IVBA ordered the evacuation of a Mordilock apartment complex that had both water damage and flammable cladding. Mr. Basiri on Wednesday went to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal in a bid to stop suspension of his registration. He said he felt horrible for actions of the past and that he did not believe I have a blatant disregard for compliance. The issues identified, he wrote in a submission to the tribunal, relate to very old projects of a particular time, the past, and not at a future date. County Court Judge Samantha Marks, who is hearing the case brought against Mr. Basiri by the IVBA, has not yet made a decision. The building authority has filed hundreds of pages of documents detailing allegations of Mr. Basiri's past negligence. The authority warned Judge Marks it was crucial that she prevent Mr. Basiri from regaining his registration, saying in a written submission the interests of the public strongly support refusal to hand him back his ability to approve more buildings. At least 4 of Mr. Basiri's recent building approvals were apartments that have now been found to be a danger to life, safety and health of any member of the public using the building. A fifth was found to be a danger to life arising out of the condition of the building. Mr. Basiri racked up $60,000 in fines for projects he worked on in Dandenong and Noble Park between 2015 and 2017. 2 projects in Dandenong were found to be susceptible to extreme risk of fire, while at another building in that suburb, he was ordered to pay almost $16,000 for failing safety requirements. Last year, Mr. Basiri was struck off as a member of the Australian Institute of Building Surveyors. Opposition planning spokesman Tim Smith said the BA and the Andrews government had been asleep over building surveyors who did the wrong thing. The authority hasn't pursued dodgy surveyors and builders at all, he said. It's taken a cladding crisis for the authority to realize it hasn't been doing its job. A BA spokeswoman said it only got discretionary powers to immediately suspend a surveyor last July. This is a serious matter, and the authority does not take such a decision lightly, she said. She declined to comment further, saying Mr. Basiri's case was an ongoing matter. Planning Minister Richard Wynn's office directed questions about the failure to act against Mr. Basiri more swiftly to the BA. In March, the authority's new powers were first used against builder Emmett Farag, who completed many projects with Mr. Basiri. Their most notorious development is a Frankston South apartment block. Taxpayers are now picking up the repair bill for problems with its flammable cladding exterior. At the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal this week, Barrister Peter Hanks, who was acting for the building authority, said there were serious deficiencies in the way Mr. Basiri has done his work. It's a sorry picture, Mr. Hanks said, asking Judge Marks not to allow the building surveyor to regain his registration in order to protect the public from what is a very serious matter. In order to practice as a building surveyor in Victoria, practitioners must hold at least a graduate degree, have 3 years experience, and be registered by a board under the Building Act. Mr. Hanks said that a building surveyor like Mr. Basiri occupies a position of fundamental importance in control of the quality and safety of buildings that are erected in this state. But Mr. Basiri told the tribunal the accusations against him were factually incorrect. He denied he was responsible for flammable cladding on one of the buildings, saying a builder was at fault. That builder did not install the right materials on the building. He told Judge Marks. Mr. Basiri acknowledged he had previous disciplinary actions against him and that he wanted to show he was good at his job in the future. "I want to be a good building surveyor," he said. After apartment buildings he signed off were found to have serious problems for which their owners would have to foot the bill, "I punished myself. I gave a voluntary undertaking I would not issue a permit for apartment buildings. I don't think really I am a danger to the public," Mr. Basiri said. He said losing his registration has had a huge impact on my family and the staff that work for me. A ruling from the tribunal on whether Mr. Basiri will get his registration back is expected soon.